Hello, my name is Catherine Phillips, and the theme I will be discussing is the afterlife. According to the Thematic Guide to World Mythology, an afterlife is an existence that continues beyond death. While many cultures have their own understanding of life after death, I will be focusing on the ancient Mesopotamian afterlife. The afterlife is pieced together through several different myths and stories, including the Epic of Gilgamesh that we studied in class. The ancient Mesopotamian netherworld is described in the World History Encyclopedia as the cosmic opposite of the heavens and a shadowy version of life on Earth. This afterlife is unique in that it is the earliest recorded form of an afterlife and has been around throughout a number of different groups, including the Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian cultures. Because of this, I think that the underworld is one of the most important afterlife beliefs because it has transcended many different cultures and has been around for centuries. This is important because the ancient Mesopotamian afterlife provides a valuable insight into how the Mesopotamians viewed mortality and life's purpose. The ancient Mesopotamian afterlife has been present in the Fertile Crescent throughout many different cultures. What is interesting about this approach to understanding the afterlife during Sumerian and Akkadian times is that it differed widely from the Egyptians, who believed that what goods individuals were buried with dictated what kind of life they lived after death. Cultures in Mesopotamia believed that the gods had made humans of clay, but to the clay had been added the flesh and blood of a god, and as a result, the sole purpose of humanity's creation was to serve the gods, to carry the yoke and labor for them. Thus, when a person dies, they go back to the netherworld and live in the afterlife where they eat the clay and dirt they were made from. This is a very grim approach to an afterlife, and as a result, it paints a very bleak picture of what life and death meant to the ancient Mesopotamian. This relates to one of the valued attributes in ancient Mesopotamian culture, that mortal beings are separate from gods, and as a result are not given the ability to become immortal, leading individuals in that culture to hold the gods on a higher pedestal. This idea was present in a number of myths created throughout that time. For example, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh goes on a laborious journey to try and gain immortality, only to realize that he is unable to do so and must make the most of the life he was given. Because Gilgamesh knows his time on earth is limited, it pushes him to be a better ruler and serve his people. This served as a reminder to ancient Mesopotamians to use what time they have on earth to do good before they are sent to the netherworld. However, because many cultures have come to power during ancient Mesopotamian times, the concept of the afterlife has changed over time. In a similar epic, The Death of Gilgamesh, Caitlin Barrett explains that the afterlife may not be as bleak as it has appeared in other cultures. She explains that mentions of grave goods both in the myth and in real life point to the expectation of a better afterlife by saying that the inclusion of a range of grave goods in simpler burials suggests that people from a broad variety of backgrounds expected a continuation of their previous existence in the next world. As stated before, the ancient Mesopotamian afterlife is characterized by being a shadowy version of life on Earth, metaphysically being far from Earth, but physically being a very short distance from Earth's surface. Some cultures believe that it was a dull place in which people ate clay and dust, whereas other myths portray celebrating in the afterlife when certain gods and goddesses came. Thus, it is viewed as a muted version of Earth. The netherworld was closely related to a few gods and goddesses, such as Ereshkigal. She is known as the Mesopotamian queen of the dead, and she rules the netherworld, keeping the dead in and keeping the living out so that they don't learn the truth of the afterlife. Her husband is Nergal, who also helps her rule 6 months out of the year. Ereshkigal is the older sister of Inanna, who is the goddess of love and fertility and also a main character in one of the myths surrounding the underworld. In Inanna's descent to the underworld, Inanna is seen trying to descend into the netherworld. In order to enter, her older sister Ereshkigal makes her take off a piece of her royal garments at each of the 7 gates of the underworld. And when she is entered, the judges of the netherworld condemn her to death. Ninshubur goes to rescue Inanna and are given 2 Gala, 2 beings that are neither male nor female.
The Gala attach themselves to Ereshkigal, and she experiences intense pain. In order to relieve this pain, she agrees to give back Inanna. Inanna is given the food and water of life, and then she is transported back out of the realm of the dead.
What is important to keep in mind while reading this myth is that Inanna is a goddess, one of the most powerful and popular in ancient Mesopotamian culture. She is one of the only figures to be able to leave the netherworld. Louise Pryke explains this by saying, as with mortals, Inanna's experience of death is heavily influenced by the strength of her social ties. It is her close bond with Enki that leads to her revival. By having such a prominent figure in Mesopotamian spirituality be able to leave the underworld, it drives home the inevitability of death to the Mesopotamian people who lived during that time that the myth was popular. To recap, the ancient Mesopotamian afterlife consisted of an underworld that was a gloomier version of life on Earth. It was ruled by Ereshkigal, and the dead who resided there were not allowed to leave, and the living were not allowed to enter. Individuals ate clay and dust that they were created from by the gods. No one was allowed to leave the underworld once they were dead, and no one could escape the inevitability of death. This idea played a large part in Mesopotamian spirituality because the people believed in the supreme power of the gods and their purpose to serve them, as well as having to come to terms with morality and their inability to change it.